The long-awaited The Last Guardian is finally available to the public, 10 years after the game started development for the PlayStation 3. Fortunately for us, after what I assume hellish development cycle and the jump to PS4, the game was worth the wait. The Last Guardian puts you in the shoes of a lost boy trying to find his way home after traumatic events that seemingly cloud his memory. As the player, you have no insight as to how or when he got into this bizarre situation. That information starts to unfold throughout the game. Injured at the bottom of a cave before your epic journey unfolds, you meet Trico, the Last Guardian's witty, stubborn, adorable, and snuggly other protagonist. Trico is one of the highlights of The Last Guardian, and he's breathtaking to look at. While the game overall is eye candy from an artistic perspective, Trico is by far the most beautiful thing to gawk at. His movements, sounds, intelligence, and animal-like instincts were so well executed by the development team. Also, I've never experienced another animal in a video game that has this amount of charm, spunk, and personality. You know when he's angry, sad, confused, scared, happy. He undoubtedly wears his heart on his feathers. As your journey moves forward, you watch him grow into a fierce beast who will do anything to protect the one he cares for. As for the rest of The Last Guardian's presentation, it's pretty clear that the game used to be a PlayStation 3 title. The muddy textures make that apparent. However, the game isn't ugly by any stretch of the imagination. I was in awe more than once because of the game's beautiful vistas and amazing draw distances. As I mentioned before, from an artistic perspective, the game looks magnificent. It just doesn't push the hardware by any stretch either. It would be insane for me not to mention the game's incredible musical score. How can I put this? This is one of the best video game soundtracks I've heard in recent memory. Not only that, but the right song consistently plays at the perfect moment throughout the game, and it's hard for me to express how much I appreciated that. There's a handful of epic moments in The Last Guardian. I got shivers down my spine multiple times. It's obvious the sound design was not an afterthought during the development of the game. It's also one of the few times I've listened to a game's soundtrack while I wasn't playing the game. I don't want to talk too heavily on the story of The Last Guardian because discovery and the few cutscenes that there are something you should go into without spoilers or any preconceived notions. I will say though, expect a dangerous, emotional, heart-pounding adventure, an experience between boy and beast that doesn't make any sense happening, but in a good way. While The Last Guardian is strong in so many spots, it lacks heavily in others. First off, the camera isn't good at all. This wouldn't usually be that serious of an issue, but for a game that relies heavily on directing around a giant beast, the camera controls should have been a huge focus for the studio. I was constantly having camera issues, whether it was simply trying to look up so I could direct Trico, or just getting dizzy from the ungodly amount of camera shaking. Thanks a lot, Trico. Aside from the camera issues, the game controls like a PS2 game, which does have some level of charm if you've played the team's previous games, Eco and Shadow of the Colossus. But seriously, jumping with triangle? Who does that? I thought maybe I'd be able to change it in the settings, but nope. The boy also controls poorly when it comes to jumping and climbing, and the few times you fight without Trico. As for the gameplay overall, there's very little combat for the boy, which I liked. Trico handles the baddies while you're solving puzzles, climbing, or trying to help Trico traverse through the land. The puzzles aren't very complex. They were always just complicated enough to make me feel smart when I solved them, and I loved that aspect. Every once in a while I'd be confused on where to go next, but it usually resulted in Trico having to jump up to a higher level. The Last Guardian tells an unforgettable story, one of which I honestly didn't expect to get so emotional over. This is a tale of love, overcoming, and repeatedly being knocked back down, but never giving up. The bond between boy and beast has never been executed so perfectly, and I salute Gen Design for never letting The Last Guardian development come to a halt. While the game does lack in the mechanics department, that doesn't take away from the good the game has to offer. You owe it to yourself to play this game. Also, turn up the music in the settings for maximum enjoyment.